Hello, and welcome to St. Jude and Five-ish. A couple of months ago, a wildfire broke out near the Fullerton tennis courts and for a moment threatened the medical center. It was the kind of event that we practice and prepare for with disaster drill training. Here to talk with us today about disaster preparation is Heather Hassinger, Director of Support Services, who oversees everything from food and nutrition services to telecommunications, engineering, security, parking, and yes, disaster and emergency management. Heather, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything that you don't do?
No, probably not. Not in support services. I pretty much cover it all.
Well, both of those events that I mentioned earlier kind of reminds us of how essential it is to know what to do when something like that occurs. And so I wanted to talk to you today about the code system that we have and how we use it and who uses it and how it works.
So the code system was designed for hospitals, and use the term code because we want to be able to identify with our caregivers, code blue, code red. The caregivers are supposed to be aware of all the codes and what they mean. And then when we call them on the overhead, they're alerted to what's going on in the hospital at that time.
And what is the difference between a code internal and a code external?
A code internal triage would be called for something, for example, like an earthquake that's impacting the building, a loss of utilities, or an actual fire in the facility in which we would have to evacuate. We would call an internal triage. For an external triage, it's variable. It could impact the hospital. However, it's something that's externally on the hospital, like the fire that we had a couple weeks ago, more than a month ago actually now. And this is something that could potentially impact the hospital, but at that time it's an external situation. Another external situation that we've drilled for is a train derailment. In the event that we would have a mass casualty event, as we call it, and have to impact our surge capacity at the hospital, we would call as an external.
So what can caregivers do to better prepare when those codes are called?
So what they should do, obviously, is listen to the overhead and understand that we typically give directions for the leaders, the coordinators, the supervisor levels to show up at our command center. Once they show up at the command center, we need a good 20 to 30 minutes to assess the situation and then be able to explain what's going on in the command center, and the folks that come to the command center can go back to their units and explain it to their staff. But then there's situations that need immediate interaction. If there's a fire on the unit, the staff should know what to do in the event of a fire in their unit to protect themselves and the family members. So they should be knowledgeable on basic codes as well as larger codes that might impact more folks than just their unit.
Can you talk a little bit about how caregivers are notified when there is an emergency? So while it's expected that they know what to do.
Sure. So the first level of communication obviously is the overhead page. Anybody that's in the hospital is going to hear that. The second level of communication, it comes from our Everbridge mass communication software, in which PBX will send out that information to leaders, coordinators, supervisor levels, and of course the executive team. That's going to be, we want to communicate to them first so that we can figure out how we're going to communicate the rest to the caregivers, the frontline caregivers.
Okay, very good. Now, as far as resources, what are some resources that caregivers can access to either get more information, or if they wanted to, let's say, get involved in the disaster drills that we do annually? How could they do that?
So we have the disaster drills that we host with the county twice a year, and we advertise those at our leadership huddles, and then we would ask that our leaders bring that back to their caregivers if they're interested in partaking. We usually have a topic, and once we find out that topic, we as emergency management team start to look at specific leaders that we want to partake depending on the drill. Like if it was a train derailment, we really want ED involved. We really want the nursing leaders involved because that's going to impact our surge capacity. If it's something like a utility failure, we actively go after people from facilities and support services because certain support services can't function without our utilities. So we'll go after those folks.
We saw that yesterday.
We saw that yesterday. So we go after, as the emergency management team, we'll go after those leaders and say, can you bring somebody to represent on the county drill to sit and just partake in it so they can understand what role they might play in a disaster? Because I think we've all seen, I've been at the hospital for 15 years, most of these disasters happen after hours, whether it be an earthquake or a pipe break. So the first responders may not be the people that have all the knowledge that we have.
And I see that you brought a prop with you today,
Yes.
just to remind folks.
These were created several years ago. And so this is our flip chart. This is our emergency management flip chart. And as you can see on the tabs is all of our codes. It gives people just a quick overview of a code and what they need to do to respond to that code until the folks that the emergency management team can make it in and support them. It's knowledge for them to get started. Also, some of these things that they would have to do during a fire, they would actually have to do on their own, get it going and actively do it. So this is a nice quick overview of all of our codes.
And what about on the badges?
So on our badges, we also have another reference of all of our codes and our emergency codes that people can reference by color. So if you hear it on the overhead, you know what it is. Some folks, some of these codes you don't hear often, code white. And so you can use your badge at any time to identify what your codes are.
To remind yourself.
And then you can match it to whatever is in the flip chart and how you should respond.
Great. Well, now is the time of the segment where we get to know you a little bit personally. And so I understand that you're a big football fan.
Yes, I am.
Can you tell me who your team is and why?
I'm an Oakland Raiders fan.
I noticed that you said Oakland.
Yes, and I'm very strong on that term, Oakland. And they have a very loyal fan base up there. And I think if you know any Raider fan, they're very loyal fans. And I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so it makes my parents very upset that I'm an Oakland Raider fan, but they moved me out here at a young age. So I was actually an LA Raider fan.
So it sounds like you're not happy about the Vegas move.
Not at all.
Yeah.
If you know Raiders fans, we're not a very professional group and very rowdy group. So the last place we need to be is in a rowdy place like Las Vegas. So that worries me.
Are you planning to go see a game?
Of course I will.
Okay. Well,
of course I will. I'll go see it. But I think there's a loyal fan base in Oakland, and taking them out of Oakland is going to be a big disadvantage to the team. But I will stay a Raiders fan.
You heard it here first. Well, Heather, thank you so much for sitting with me today and talking about this very important topic.
Yes.
And thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay healthy, St. Jude.